Wisdom, Judgment. An article from Charles Fillmore. Which is the greater, wisdom or love? After long study of the fine analysis of love, given by Paul in the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, Henry Drummond pronounced love to be the greatest thing in the world. His conclusion is based on the fine setting forth by Paul on the virtues of love. Had there been as good a champion of wisdom, the author of love, the greatest thing in the world, might not have been so sure of his conclusion. It goes without argument that love wins when everything else fails, but notwithstanding her mightiness, she does make a lot of blunders. Love will make any and every sacrifice for the thing she loves. On the other hand, she is enticed into trap after trap in her blind search for pleasure. It was this kind of love that caused Eve to fall under the spell of sensation, the serpent. She saw that the fruit of the tree was pleasant to the eyes. She followed the pleasure of life instead of the wisdom that would have shown her how to use life. We have ever since had a lot of pleasure and pain, or good and evil, as the result of Eve's blind love. You ask, what kind of people would we be if Eve and Adam had been obedient to the Lord of wisdom instead of obeying the sense of love? This is one of the biggest questions you or anyone can ask. It has been debated up one side and down the other, ever since people began to reason. It has a double answer, and those who get the first will claim it is correct, and those who get the second will assure you that there can be no other conclusion. The question hinges on one point, and that is, whether it is necessary to experience evil to appreciate good. If it were possible for man to know all the wisdom and joy of the infinite, he had no necessity of experience with the opposite. But do we have to have pain before we can enjoy pleasure? Does the child that burns its hand on a hot stove have a larger consciousness of health when the hand is healed? Or has it learned more about stoves? Unnumbered illustrations of this kind might be given to show that we learn the relations existing between things in the phenomenal world by experimentation. But if we apply this rule to sciences that are governed by absolute rules, the necessity of knowing the negative fails. To become proficient in mathematics, it is not necessary to make errors. The closer one follows the rules in exact sciences, the easier and more successful the demonstrations. This goes to prove that the nearer one approaches the absolute, or cause side of existence, the greater is his understanding that wisdom and order rule, and that he who joins wisdom and order rules with them. God knows that there is a great negative, which is a reflection of his positive, but he is not conscious of its existence. We know that there is an underworld of evil, in which all the rules of civilized life are broken, but we are not conscious of that world because we do not enter into it. It is one thing to view error as a thing apart from us, and quite another to enter into its consciousness. In the allegory of Adam and Eve, the man and woman were told by wisdom not to eat, or enter into consciousness of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But the pleasure of sensation, serpent, tempted them, and they did eat. When one has entered into the feeling side of life, the law of unity is fulfilled, and the heavens, mind, and earth, body, are united. When this union becomes a habit, the I am is submerged or buried in the earth. The wisdom or knowing side of man is ignored, and a realm of consciousness is established that regards the material universe as the only reality. But the Lord, the knowing side of man, talks to him in the cool of the day. In the heat of passion and the joy of pleasure, man does not listen to the still, small voice, but in the cool of the day. That is, when he cools off, he reflects, and he hears the voice of wisdom and judgment saying, "Where art thou, Adam?" The great day of judgment, which has been located at some fateful time in the future when we shall all be called before the judge of the world and have punishment meted out to us for our sins, is every day. The translators of the New Testament are responsible for the future great judgment day bugaboo. In every instance where judgment was mentioned by Jesus, he said, "in a day of judgment." But the translators changed the "a" to the, making it appear a definite time in the future, instead of the repeated consummations of causes that occur in the lives of individuals and nations. We know that we are constantly being brought to judgment for transgressing the laws moral and physical. Yet back of these is the spiritual law, which the whole race broke, and for which we suffer. It was for the mending of this broken law that Jesus came. When we awaken to the reality of our being, the light begins to break upon us from within, and we know the truth. This is the quickening of our James faculty. When this occurs, we find ourselves discriminating between the good and the evil. We no longer accept the race standards nor the teaching of the worldly wise, but judge righteous judgment. We know with an inner intuition, and we judge men and events from a new viewpoint. Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers, sings the poet. This pertains to intellectual development only. When man kindles the inner light, he speaks the word of authority to his subjective faculties. Jesus represents the Son of God consciousness in man, to whom was given dominion over all the earth. The Son of God man is wholly spiritual, and he uses spiritual thoughts, words, and laws in all that he does. When Jesus called his disciples, he spoke silently to the faculties and soul that preside over and direct the functions of mind and body. When he called Peter, James, and John, there was a quickening in his consciousness of faith, judgment, and love. These three disciples are more often mentioned than the others with him in his works, because they are most essential in the expression of a well-balanced man. Andrew, strength, was also among the first called, and he represents that all-round stability that lies at the foundation of every true character. James the Just was the title bestowed upon the first bishop of Jerusalem by historians. There were many Jameses among the early followers of Jesus, and there is some doubt as to whether James the Just and James the Disciple are identical. However, the preponderance of authority is in favor of his having been one of the 12. An analysis of man and his threefold nature reveals that on every plane there is a certain reflective and discerning power of the mind and its thoughts. In the body, conclusions are arrived at through experience. In intellect, reason is the assumed arbiter of every question. In spirit, intuition and inspiration bring the quick and sure answer to all the problems of life. Jesus was the greatest of the teachers of men because he ran the gamut of knowledge from the highest to the lowest. He did not blight the senses by calling them error, because they are limited in their range of vision, but he lifted them up. He took Peter, James, and John up into the mountain and was transfigured before them. When we realize the spiritual possibilities with which we are endued by omnipotent mind, we are lifted up, and all the faculties that we have called are lifted up with us. I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all unto myself. Diaglott. Wisdom, justice, judgment are grouped under one head in spiritual consciousness. Webster says, the ground of reason and judgment, which makes conclusions knowledge, is found in the connecting link that binds the conceptions together. This authority also says that in religion there is the postulate of a judgment through direct perception of the divine law. Solomon, the sun man, or solar plexus man, when asked by the Lord what he should give him, chose wisdom above riches and honor. Then all the other things were added. Solomon was also a great judge. He had a rare intuition, and he used it freely in arriving at his judgments. He did not rest his investigations on mere facts, but sought out the inner motives. In the case of the two women who claimed the same infant, he commanded an attendant to bring a sword and cut the child in twain and give a half to each woman. Of course, the real mother begged him not to do this, and he knew at once that she was the mother. This appeal to the affectional nature in man for judgment in its highest is in harmony with divine law. We have thought that we were not safe in trusting our feelings to guide us in important issues. But spiritual discernment shows that the quick knowing power of man has its seat of action in the breast. The breastplates worn by Jewish and Druidical high priests had 12 stones, representing the 12 great powers of the mind. Ready insight into the divine law was the glory of the high priest. Jesus is called the high priest of God, and every man's name is the name Jesus, written large or small, according to his perception of his Son of God nature. Intuition, judgment, wisdom, justice, discernment, pure knowing, and profound understanding are natural to man. All of these qualities, and many more, belong to us every one by and through our divine sonship. Ye are God's, and all of you sons of the Most High, the Christ proclaims in us all. Paul saw Christ waiting at the door of every soul when he wrote, Awake, thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall shine upon thee. A quickening of our divine judgment arouses in us the judge of all the world. The wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, etc. When we call this righteous judge into action, we may find our standards of right and wrong undergoing rapid changes, but if we hold steadily to the Lord our supreme guide, we shall be led into all righteousness. Let all those who doubt the infinite law of justice working in all things now take heart and know that it has not worked in their affairs because they have not called it into activity in the creative center of the soul. When we call our inner forces into action, the law universal begins its great work in us, and all the laws both great and small fall into line and work for us. We do not make the law is, and it has been established for our benefit since the foundation of the world. Jesus did not make the law of health when he healed the multitudes. He simply called it into expression by getting it recognized by those who had disregarded its existence. Even those who practiced the carrying out of man-made laws recognize that back of the judge is the law out of which he reads. Blackstone says, the judgment, though pronounced and awarded by the judges, is not their determination or sentence, but the determination and sentence of the law. So we who are carrying forward the fulfillment of the law as inaugurated by Jesus should be wise in recognizing that the law already exists right here in all its fullness, waiting for us to identify ourselves with it, and thus allow it to fulfill its righteousness in us and in all the world. End of article.